My name is Diana Coro. I am 46 years old, and when I walked out of my mother's house on Briarfield Lane last Sunday evening, I sat in the driver's seat of my rental car for 11 minutes without turning the key. I know it was 11 minutes because the dashboard clock read 7:38 when I pulled the door shut and 7:49 when my hand finally reached the ignition. The porch light behind me was still on. My mother had not come outside. Nobody had. Let me tell you how we got there. But first, before I take you back to where this started, tell me, what time is it where you are? Because I remember exactly what time it was the night everything changed. 6:14 on a Saturday evening, 3 months before that silent car ride. Some moments burn the clock into your memory. 6:14 is burned into mine, not because of what was said, because of the chair. There was an empty chair at the table, 12 place settings, white linen, the good silverware my mother brings out when she wants people to feel the weight of belonging. 12 settings, 12 people expected. And the 12th chair, my chair, had been removed from the table and placed against the wall by the hallway. A dinner napkin was folded on its seat, unused. My name was not on the place card arrangement. The arrangement only had 11 names. I counted them the way I count everything, left to right, then back again to confirm. 11 names. The napkin on that hallway chair was still in its original crease. Nobody had even unfolded it before deciding I did not belong at the table. My brother Clement saw me notice. He picked up his water glass and said, "We didn't set one for you. Mama said you'd understand." That was his voice, casual, mid-sip, the way you mentioned that the dry cleaner moved to a new location. "We didn't set one for you," as though my absence from a family dinner table was a scheduling detail and not a decision someone made about my worth in this house. I stood in the doorway holding a casserole dish I'd driven 40 minutes to deliver. The ceramic was still warm against my palms. I could feel the heat through the cloth I'd wrapped it in, and beneath that heat, the precise edges of the dish's rim pressing into my fingers. I did not put the dish down. I did not leave. Something in me went very still, the kind of still that has nothing to do with calm. My eyes moved across the table in a pattern I've used 10,000 times professionally. Surface scan, then perimeter, then anomaly identification. 11 place cards, 12 chairs purchased as a set, one relocated. I was already running numbers I hadn't asked my mind to run. I was calculating how long the chair had been against that wall. The dust on the floor showed no drag marks. It had been moved hours ago, maybe the night before. I said, "Fine." Clement couldn't hear what that word actually meant. Nobody in that room could. They heard a woman accepting a slight. What they couldn't hear was the inventory I'd already started taking. The chair was data point 1. The missing place card was data point 2. And my mother, who was standing in the kitchen with her back to me when I arrived, who had not turned around, had not greeted me, had not acknowledged the dish I brought, that was data point 3. I left the casserole on the hallway table next to my exiled chair and drove home. The whole way back, my hands smelled like garlic and rosemary from the dish I'd made from her recipe. Now let me tell you what I do for a living, because it matters. I am a catastrophe bond structuring analyst. For 22 years, I have worked in the reinsurance sector, the industry that exists behind the insurance industry, the layer most people never see. My job is to model worst-case scenarios, hurricanes that hit the wrong coastline, earthquakes that arrive 12 years ahead of projections, financial collapses triggered by correlating risks nobody thought to correlate. I build mathematical models that predict when invisible systems will fail. I identify hidden exposure. I find the thing no one priced into their assumptions. That skill had protected institutional portfolios worth billions for over 2 decades. It was about to dismantle my own family's 30-year fraud. The thing about catastrophe modeling is this. You learn that every large failure is preceded by a series of small signals that people explain away. A crack in a foundation, a missing inspection stamp, a number that's 3% off from what it should be. Most people see those signals and think, probably nothing. I see them and think, that's the edge of the map. The place where the modeled world ends and the real exposure begins. My family, the Okoro family of Briarfield Lane, headed by my mother Grace, and organized around my older brother Clement, had been generating those signals for as long as I could remember. And for most of my life, I did what most people do. I explained them away. The pattern was elegant in its simplicity. Grace Okoro had 4 children. Clement was the eldest, then me, then our sister Yemi, then our youngest brother Tunde. Clement was the chosen one. I don't mean that metaphorically. I mean my mother said it out loud, at family dinners, in front of all of us, beginning when I was 9 years old. Clement carries this family's name. Everything we build for Clement. She said it the way other mothers say, wash your hands before dinner. It was policy. Not opinion, policy. What this meant in practice was a funding structure. Every sibling contributed to Clement. Yemi paid for his MBA application fees. I co-signed his first apartment lease when he was 26 and I was 24, and had a credit score I'd spent 3 careful years building. Tund, who was still in community college at the time, worked weekends at a warehouse and sent Clement $200 a month for what my mother called household support. Clement was living alone. There was no household to support, there was just Clement. And here is where my profession failed me most spectacularly, because I should have modeled this. I should have seen the correlation between every request and every extraction. I should have plotted the curve. The first time Clement asked me for $5,000 to invest in his consulting firm, I was 31 years old and had just made senior analyst at a reinsurance firm in Connecticut. I sent the money within a week. He never mentioned the firm again. The second time, it was $12,000 for a licensing issue. The third, $8,500 for a tax shortfall. Each request arrived on the phone in my mother's voice, not Clement's. She would call at odd hours, always with the same opening. Your brother needs your help. You know what family means. I tracked the total later. Over 15 years, I sent Clement $214,000 in direct transfers. That does not include the lease I co-signed, the credit card I added him to, or the 3 months I housed his daughter Amara when he said his living situation was in transition. His living situation was always in transition. His confidence never was. The irony is that I spent my professional life building models specifically designed to detect when someone is drawing down a resource faster than it can replenish, and I never once applied that model to my own bank account. I was the exposure I'd been hired to find. But the dinner with the missing chair, that was the event that broke the model. Not because it was the worst thing they'd done, because it was the most legible. A chair removed from a table is not ambiguous. It cannot be reframed as a misunderstanding. Someone picked it up, carried it 10 feet, and set it against a wall. That is a decision made with both hands. What I didn't know yet, what I would spend the next 11 weeks uncovering, was why. Why now? Why the chair? Why the sudden, visible exclusion after decades of quiet extraction? What had changed? The answer, when I found it, restructured everything I thought I knew about my family, not just the last year, the last 30. It started 3 days after the dinner. I was reviewing my personal financial records, something I do quarterly, the way most people schedule dental cleanings, and I noticed an irregularity, a $43,000 transfer from my brokerage account to an account I did not recognize. The transfer had been initiated 7 weeks earlier. The routing number belonged to a credit union in Maryland. I had never held an account in Maryland. I had never authorized this transfer. I did not call the bank immediately. I did what I do. I pulled the metadata. The transfer had been initiated online, using saved credentials, from a device identified by its MAC address. I cross-referenced that address against the devices logged into my home Wi-Fi network over the past year. The device belonged to Clement's daughter Amara, the same Amara who had stayed with me for 3 months the previous spring. While she was living in my guest room, someone had used her laptop to access my brokerage account. And that's what I was thinking about when I sat in that car for 11 minutes on Briarfield Lane. That $43,000 was only the beginning. The next layer came from the credit union itself. I drove to Maryland on a Tuesday, sat across from a branch manager named Dennis Adeyemi, who confirmed that the receiving account had been opened 14 months prior. The account holder's name was not Clement Okoro, it was Grace Okoro, my mother. The account had received 11 deposits over 14 months, totaling $187,000. Every deposit had originated from a different account. 3 of those origin accounts were mine: brokerage, savings, and a dormant retirement rollover I hadn't checked in 2 years. 4 belonged to Yemi, 2 belonged to Tunde, 2 I could not yet identify. I asked Dennis for the account opening documents. He printed them. The signature on the application was my mother's. The co-signer line had a second name, Clement Okaro, authorized signatory with full withdrawal privileges. I held those documents in the credit union parking lot and felt the second stillness, the one that isn't shock but something past shock, something architectural. My hands were flat on the pages. I could feel the texture of the paper, the slight raised edge of the credit union's stamp in the corner. I was mapping the structure of what I was looking at, not emotionally, geometrically. 14 months of deposits, coordinated origin accounts, a joint account neither co-signer had disclosed. This was not opportunism, it was infrastructure. Layer 3 opened when I called Yemi. I did not tell her what I had found. I asked her one question: have you checked your retirement account balance recently? There was a silence on the line that lasted long enough for me to hear her television in the background, some cooking show with a timer going off. Then she said, "Why are you asking me that?" And I knew. Yemi had noticed. Yemi had not said anything because the same thing that kept me quiet for 15 years kept her quiet too: the unspoken tax my mother levied on dissent. If you questioned the structure, you were the problem, not the structure. Yemi sent me her statements that night. Her losses totaled $94,000 across 3 accounts. Tunde's, when I reached him 2 days later, were $61,000. The pattern was identical: saved credentials accessed from devices used during family visits, small transfers timed to coincide with market fluctuations that would mask the withdrawals in normal account noise. Whoever designed this understood how to hide movement inside volatility. That is not a layperson's skill. That is someone who listened when I talked about my work. And then layer 4, the thing underneath everything. I pulled the formation documents for Clement's consulting firm, the one I'd given him $5,000 to start 13 years ago. It was registered in Delaware. It had never filed a tax return, but it had a bank account. And that bank account had received, over 13 years, a total of $2.7 million. Not from clients. From a single source, a real estate holding company called Briarfield Lane Properties LLC, which owned the house my mother lived in, the duplex Clement rented to tenants on Sycamore Street, and 4 additional residential properties in the same county. Briarfield Lane Properties LLC had been formed 26 years ago. Its registered agent was Grace Okoro. Its managing member was Clement Okoro. Its capital had come from an inheritance, my father's life insurance payout, dispersed after his death when I was 19 years old. My mother had told us the payout was $40,000 and that it had been used for funeral expenses and household debts. The actual payout, according to the insurance company's records division, which I contacted with a certified copy of my father's death certificate and proof of beneficiary status, was $385,000. The difference, $345,000, had been used as the seed capital for a real estate portfolio that had grown, over 26 years, into an empire worth an estimated $2.7 billion in current assessed value, accounting for the commercial properties added to the LLC's holdings over the subsequent decades using leveraged equity and reinvested rental income. My father's money, my father's death, laundered through my mother's hands into my brother's name, while the rest of us sent Clement cash for licensing issues and tax shortfalls. While the rest of us co-signed his leases and housed his daughter and swallowed every demand wrapped in the language of family obligation. The dinner, the chair, it made sense now. They didn't exclude me because they'd stopped needing me. They excluded me because Clement's accountant had warned him that my professional background made me a liability. Someone who models catastrophic financial exposure for a living might eventually model the one sitting across the table from her. The chair against the wall wasn't cruelty, it was risk management. They were cutting me out before I could look in. They were 11 weeks too late. I chose the confrontation setting deliberately. Clement had recently renovated the Briarfield Lane house, new kitchen, imported tile, a dining room extension that seated 20. He'd hosted a family appreciation brunch to debut the renovation. "Mom, you told us it was $40,000. My mother set her glass down. Her face did not change. "Diane, this is not the time or place. The LLC," I continued, "has generated $2.7 billion in assessed real estate value over 26 years. Clement is the managing member. He has drawn $2.7 million through a shell consulting firm registered in Delaware that has never filed a tax return." Clement stood up. "That's a lie. You don't know what you're talking about." I placed the Delaware formation document on the table, then the credit union account records, then the insurance company's disbursement letter, then the MAC address log from my own home network, showing the device used to access my brokerage account. My mother tried next. "After everything I've done for this family, you come into my home with these accusations? I raised you. I fed you. I kept this family together after your father died. You kept it together with his money," I said, "and then with ours." Clement shifted. "You're doing this because you're jealous. You've always been jealous of what I built." I did not respond to that. I placed one more document on the table, the insurance company's original beneficiary designation, 4 names, equal shares, all 4 children, not just Clement, not just my mother as trustee, all 4 of us. We were each owed $96,250. None of us, not Yemi, not Tunde, not I, had ever received a cent. "Not in front of everyone," my mother said. Her voice had dropped. "Diane, not here. This is the house Dad's money built. I think here is exactly right." Harold Mbeki, the family attorney, had been seated at the far end of the table. He had not spoken. He had been reading the documents as I placed them. Now he cleared his throat and stood. "Grace," he said, "I need to disclose something. I advised you in 2003 that the beneficiary designation required equal distribution. You told me you would handle it. I have the letter I sent you on file. I brought a copy today because Diane contacted me last week, and I felt it was appropriate to be here." The room went very quiet. Harold Mbeki was not my witness. He was my mother's attorney. He had sat at this table for 20 years. And he was standing now, because the record he kept did not match the story she told. Clement looked at Harold, then at my mother, then at me. I said one sentence. I said it quietly, the way I would read a finding in a risk report, no emphasis, no drama, just the fact as it existed. "You didn't build a family, you built a fund, and you made the rest of us the premium." I did not say anything else. Yemi was sitting across from me. She had not spoken during any of this. She had arrived at the brunch with the same tight smile she always wore at family functions, the smile that kept her inside the structure. She had watched me place each document. She had watched Harold stand, and when Clement turned to her and said, "Yemi, tell her she's wrong. Tell her this is insane." Yemi looked at her plate. Then she looked at me. Then she said, "I checked my accounts last month, Clement. Diane's not wrong." That was the first time in our lives that Yemi had contradicted Clement in a room where our mother was present. Her voice shook. It was the bravest sentence I'd ever heard her say. It was also 20 years late. Both of those things were true at the same time. The consequences arrived in the order consequences always arrive. Financial first, then legal, then social, then personal, like concentric rings spreading from the same dropped stone. Within 10 days of the brunch, I filed a formal complaint with the State Insurance Commissioner's office regarding the misappropriation of life insurance proceeds. The investigation opened within 3 weeks. Clement's Delaware LLC was flagged for failure to file 13 years of tax returns. The IRS opened a parallel inquiry. The estimated back taxes, penalties and interest exceeded $1.1 million. Briarfield Lane Properties LLC's bank accounts were frozen pending the insurance commissioner's review. Clement could not access rental income from any of the 6 properties. 2 tenants, informed of the ownership dispute, withheld rent. The duplex on Sycamore Street, which had a deferred maintenance issue Clement had been ignoring, received a code violation citation that required $78,000 in immediate repairs. My mother's credit union account, the one in Maryland, the one with $187,000 drawn from her children's accounts, was flagged by the credit union's own fraud department after I filed an unauthorized transfer report. The account was frozen. My mother retained an attorney. The attorney, after reviewing the documents I had provided to the credit union, advised her to negotiate restitution rather than contest the claim. Clement's wife, Nkechi, who had not attended the brunch, filed for legal separation 6 weeks later. Court records listed undisclosed financial obligations and fraudulent asset concealment as contributing factors. Nkechi had not known about the LLC. She had not known about the insurance money. She had believed, as all of us had believed, that Clement's success was self-made. Socially, the family fractured along the line Harold and Becky had drawn by standing up. Aunts and uncles, who had spent decades repeating my mother's version of events, that she had sacrificed everything, that she had raised 4 children on $40,000, that Clement was the self-made pride of the family, went quiet. Not all of them apologized. Most did not. But the silence was its own correction. Yemi called me 2 weeks after the brunch. We talked for 3 hours. She told me she had known about the account discrepancies for 8 months and had been too afraid to say anything. She said she was sorry. I told her I heard her, and that hearing her didn't mean I was ready to act like 8 months of silence hadn't cost me anything. She said she understood. I believe she did. Whether understanding is enough is a question I'm still sitting with. Tunde, the youngest, did something I did not expect. He drove to the Briarfield Lane house, the house our father's money built, and picked up Amara, Clement's daughter, the same Amara whose laptop had been used to access my accounts. Amara was 19. She had not known what her laptop was used for. Tund brought her to his apartment, helped her apply for financial aid at a community college she'd been considering, and co-signed her enrollment paperwork. He called me and said, she didn't do this, and she shouldn't pay for it. I agreed. I sent Amara a check for her first semester's books. I did not write a note with it. The check was the note. Harold and Becky resigned as the family's attorney. In his resignation letter, which he copied to me, to Yemi, and to Tunde, he wrote that he had failed in his fiduciary duty by not pursuing the beneficiary distribution more aggressively in 2003. He offered to testify if any civil proceedings required his account. It was the most honest letter I'd ever received from an attorney. It was also 23 years late, both things true, the same pattern repeating. 6 months later, I did the thing I'd been postponing for 11 years. I applied to the reinsurance firm's internal leadership track, the program I'd declined 3 times because every time the application window opened, a family emergency arrived that consumed my savings, my energy, or my attention. There was no emergency this time, no phone call at odd hours, no extraction wrapped in obligation. I was accepted. I want to talk about something I've been thinking about since that evening in the car, those 11 minutes with the engine off and the porch light on. There is a difference between loyalty and obedience that most families never name. Loyalty is a choice made freely, renewed by evidence that the people you're loyal to would make the same choice for you. Obedience is a tax levied on people who've been taught that questioning the structure means questioning love itself. I was obedient for 30 years. I called it loyalty because loyalty sounds like something you choose. I did not choose. I was trained, and the training was so good that I built a career identifying invisible structures everywhere except inside my own house. The system worked because it made each extraction feel singular, a one-time need, a temporary hardship, a family pulling together. It was never singular. It was scheduled. It was modeled, not by me, by someone who watched me explain my work at Thanksgiving dinners and learned enough to hide movement inside volatility. What I know now is this: consequences are not revenge, they are what was always owed. The investigation, the frozen accounts, the tax inquiry, none of that was something I manufactured. All of it was debt that had been accumulating for 26 years, deferred by silence, enabled by obedience, compounding quietly the way all unpriced risk compounds. I didn't create the exposure, I just stopped pretending it wasn't there. Last week, I sat in my own apartment, the one I pay for with money no one else has access to, at my own desk, reviewing the quarterly risk report I'd been assigned as part of the leadership program. The numbers on the screen were large, institutional, impersonal. I finished the analysis and closed my laptop. The desk was clean. There was a single place setting on the kitchen table behind me, one plate, one glass, one napkin unfolded and used. I had cooked for myself. My father's recipe, garlic and rosemary. The apartment smelled like his kitchen. The chair was exactly where I'd put it. No one had moved it. Looking back at the beginning of your own version of this story, was there a moment when you already knew and chose to call it something else? And if that moment is still sitting in your memory right now, what are you going to do about the chair? This story is a fictional narrative created for entertainment, education, and dramatic reflection. We hope it reminded you that your dignity is not negotiable and that setting a boundary, even a painful one, can be an act of love for yourself and everyone the pattern would have reached next.